Gwen joins us again on the Tabletop Bellhop, this time sharing the favorite games she played growing up. Great games you may want to share with your kids.
Well, Deanna's eye surgery went well. She is still recovering and sadly isn't able to join us tonight. So I asked Gwen if she wanted to join us again and talk about some of her favorite games from over the years. After that, we'll be talking about the games we've been playing, and we're going to wrap up with 2 reviews. Survive the Island, which is the latest version of Survive from Zygomatic, and Oros, which we like to call Populous in board game form.
Before we get going, it's time for some introductions. I'm Sean, your host, and here with us for the second time in a row is graphic artist Gwendolyn.
Hello again.
And then there's a guy named Mo.
Yeah, it's just me, the Tabletop Bellhop, your cardboard concierge, the guy that helps make your game nights better.
Now, we aim to record our podcasts live Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, twitch.tv/Tabletop Bellhop, and we love it when people join us in our lobby, the chat room.
This episode exists in big part thanks to our Patreon patrons, and I think also our sponsor, Grand Gamers Guild, though their sponsorship acquired, but then Mark's been in Australia, but I think he wanted to renew. But we like Mark. Mark likes us. You can find show notes for this episode at tabletopbellhop.com/episode 271. That's 271, the numbers 27 and 1. Links there may be affiliate links, which cost you nothing to use, but also help support the show.
One of the things we have gotten asked a lot over the years has been what are our favorite and what we think the best kids games are out there. Over the years, myself, Mo, and Deanna have told you a lot about our favorites.
Yeah, in addition to multiple game recommendation episodes featuring kids games, we've often talked about the games we've been playing with our kids as they grew up during our Bellhop's Tabletop segment. Now, what I thought would be interesting, since we do have Gwen on the show again today, is to have her share some of her favorite games. Well, I can tell you my thoughts on the games. We've never really had her sit down and explain which ones she likes. Since she's played most of these games, I want to hear about what were her favorite games, and if she has anything interesting to say about growing in a household that's kind of addicted to board games.
So I guess I'll just sort of jump into some of the games I enjoyed when I was very young. So one of my favorites was called Viva Topo. And in this game, we were playing as a bunch of mice, which were running away from this cat who was trying to eat the mice, and you were trying to collect cheese and get away from the cat. Surprisingly, I actually did play this game with the actual rules pretty often, which was not to be said about some of the other games on here. Playing with either my family or with my sister Eve. But of course, I also love to steal the wooden cat piece and sometimes also the mice to use in my own board games. Specifically, I think, although we donated the game, I still have the cat because it's in a box of a homemade game I have. So that's interesting. I sort of wish that I could still go back and play the actual game because I really enjoyed it as a kid. But since we donated it, I can't really compare it to how my memories of it are. But in my memories, I definitely remember loving this game.
Yeah, this was a neat game. The big thing that was neat in this one, and this was it was above a roll and move. It was a roll and move game, but you had multiple mice that were on the track. And when you rolled the dice, you had to decide which of your mice to move. And your goal was to get to Cheesevana at the very end. And the first person in Cheesevana would get the biggest chunk of cheese. And then the next person would get the next smallest chunk of cheese. And the fun part was trying to decide which mouse to move. So do you just take one mouse and run them really far ahead to get a big piece of cheese? Or do you try to move all your mice so none get caught? And then there were little buildings on the corners of the board where if you're in them, you could hide out there so the cat would go past. And then if you rolled the right number, I think it was the 6 on the die, there was just a cat symbol on the die. If you rolled that, the cat also moved. And the cat was neat because it just moved on its own track that was different than the mouse's track. So the cat would move faster, and it starts off slow, but then starts to escalate, jumping multiple spots. And it had awesome wooden components with these wooden mice with, it had felt. Not felt, what's the word? Yarn, whiskers, and little plastic ears. It was just the cutest game. And again, it wasn't just a roll and move because there were very valid decisions to be made while playing the game. It wasn't just roll the thing and move a mouse. You had to pick which mouse to move. And do you hide in the corner or do you try to push your luck? And for a game for younger kids, ages 4+, I thought this was fantastic.
Yeah, it had sort of a racing game feel, even though it wasn't really a racing game, just because of all the mice and the track. So yeah.
And so the dice in it's a D6, but it's actually a 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with the 2 1s being the cat
There you go.
movement
Okay.
dice. It has won any number of awards. First released in 2002, the latest English release was in 2025 by Pegasus Spiel. So Viva Mouse is how you can find it these days.
Yeah, so available now, not out of print.
So the next game up is Lupin Louie, which is about like a crazed pilot flying around above a farm, and your objective is to try and protect your chickens by hitting the pilot away. This game plays 2 to 4 players, but even I tended to get a little bit creative with the player counts. Especially, I love to play solo. This is not a solo game, but I would try to protect like all 4 chicken coops at once, or try to kill everyone else's chickens before, like, while protecting mine, even though there weren't any other players. But when we were playing together, we would normally play with the actual rules, but stretch it to sometimes play as 2 players. So we were each protecting 2 chicken coops, even though we were only supposed to be protecting 1. Either way, the game was a lot of fun. The only thing I did not like about it was the sound that the like motor in the game made when it was on.
So anyone who used to come out to our events, we used to host at the local game stores, especially Brimstone Games. John Salila, local gamer, loved this game and would bring it out to our events. And so many of you have probably played this silly game, super toyetic. It's, takes batteries, makes a ton of noise. And it's a dexterity game, a very light dexterity game. There was a Star Wars retheme, Lupin Chewie, that was released, but we never did, despite our whole family pretty much being Star Wars fans, pick that one up. That one only played 3 players, though. Now, I know John went on to take his 2-player version, took 2 of them, and made a 6-player version, which I actually only got to see at one event.
And so there are also versions called Barn Buzzin' Goofy and Bobbin' Bumblebee, as well as the most recent version, which is Bluey Keepy Uppy, released in 2023.
Does Bluey have 3 or 4 players?
Bluey is 2 to 3, same as Chewie.
So it's the same
most
as
of them
the
are 2
Chewie
3.
one. Okay. I wonder why they got it down to 3 instead of 4.
And actually, the Barn Buzzin' Goofy is only 2. It's not even 2 or 3.
Oh, huh.
I feel like
a tournament with all of them.
I feel like it worked really well as a 4-player game. I can't really imagine it as like 3-player. I don't know. Anyways, so the next game I want to talk about is Monster Factory. So this game is about drawing tiles to add onto your monster and score points based on how many eyes it has and how many tiles it's composed of. The art in this game was very cute, and I would sit for hours on my own building creatures out of the tiles just on the floor. And I also played the game with Eve. Even then, though, sometimes we were just competing to make the coolest looking monster, and we would like fight over pieces that we thought were prettier than the others. But we did play with the actual rules as well.
This one continues to be popular. You'll generally see it out at our events around Halloween. I'll bring it out. Or if we do like a monster themed event, I'll bring this one out. It is actually a really solid tile laying game. Deanna and I discovered at our first ever Origins, they had an extra large version of the game. We played it and then we're like, we got to get a copy of this. The kids will love it. It's neat. Your first goal is just build a monster. At that point, the eyes don't matter. It's just complete the monster so it doesn't have any dead ends. But then once you complete a monster, if other players are still in, you then start building minions. And there you get points based on how many eyes your minions have when you complete them. And it's just neat. It's a solid game, solid tile laying game. And I know local gamers who are adults who prefer this over Carcassonne.
And the art, of course, is by Nina Paley, all original art by the American cartoonist and animator Nina Paley, whose work you may know, known for such things as Sita Sings the Blues, the animated film, as well as comic books such as Nina's Adventures and Fluff.
One of the next games I want to talk about is Outfoxed, which is a detective-like game where you're trying to figure out which fox is guilty of committing a crime by investigating the town and looking for clues about like what the visual appearance of the culprit is. The game is very fun, and I loved it as a kid. So much that I think I actually didn't lose any pieces to this game, which is shocking. I think we still have every piece for this game, which is surprising compared to some of the others. It had really interesting components, and like the way to reveal the clues is very unique compared to other games. But yeah.
Yeah, this one's well done. This one was when I was a new parent. I was on Board Game Geek and talking to other gamers and listening to podcasts. I couldn't remember exactly where, but someone recommended this as a fantastic kids game. For one, it's cooperative. There are not a lot of cooperative kids games out there. And depending on your kids and how competitive they are, cooperative is often better. And we've also called out cooperative games being good because the parents can help without, ruining the game. So they had that going for it as well. And this is a true deduction game. And it had a really neat, like plasticky toyetic piece that you used to determine what, like, oh, did the person have whatever, a mustache? And you put it in like, nope, they didn't have a mustache. Now I know it's not these people. Yeah, fantastic game. Still strongly recommended. No clue if it's still in print.
Yeah, this one, I'm not clear if it's in print. There haven't been any recent English printings, but that doesn't mean that the older printings aren't still in circulation out there. Just be aware that there are two outfoxed and both use an exclamation mark. The one from 2014 is the children's game we're talking about. The one from 2017 is somebody's indie game that doesn't even really have art or anything. So that's outfoxed with an exclamation mark from 2014 if you're checking on Board Game Geek.
Currently available on Amazon, so it is still out there. Tabletop Merchant has it cheaper.
So although it's not on my list, talking about Outfox just reminded me, do you remember the name of the game? It had a fox and you were blind and you were grabbing pieces. You were like stealing from the pieces in the box.
Master Fox or Mr. Fox?
Yeah, that game. I also really liked that
Master
game as
Fox.
a kid. Mm-hmm. That one was very fun.
Yeah, we must have donated that one.
I think we did. I think we got rid of it around the same time as Viva Topo.
So Master Fox is a German game imported by ELO, where you have to wear a blindfold, and in the box are meeples that are all different shapes, and you have to find the appropriate one. So you're like trying to find the snake. Well, the snake in that's kind of jaggy, and there's also a hedgehog that's kind of spiky. And it was a game where you were learning tactile skills. You were learning how to feel for things. Very neat game. It was also a memory game, and there was some pattern recognition involved. Very interesting game. Personally, I remember liking that one, but finding Laundry Jumble to be better. Do you remember Laundry Jumble, Gwen?
No, I do not remember that one.
Laundry Jumble was one of the first games we ever bought you when you were extremely young. Like Master Fox, I think you're probably 4 or 5, whereas Laundry Jumble was before that. Laundry Jumble was a game where it actually came with a cloth laundry machine, and you put clothes in it, and you would flip up a card and it would show like underpants, and you'd have to reach in and pull out the underpants. And that was pretty much the whole game. Whoever, filled the most cards first wins. And it was just, again, teaching you textures and feeling and what do you call that? I can't think of the term. The problem your sister has, the cognitive, and I can't think of the word for it. Central processing. Learning tactile nature and touching things.
While you were talking about that, I vaguely remember the fabric washing machine, and I think we still have some of the clothes that came with that mixed in with doll clothes.
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
That one was from Educational Insights back in 2010, and that's probably going to be pretty hard to find these days.
Okay, so of course it would not be childhood games if I didn't mention making up my own games. As a kid, I loved to combine game pieces and create my own games to play with Eve. And somehow I still have a couple that have been immortalized with their own boxes. One of these games I named Split Splat Cat Attack, and the other one is an unnamed game in a red box of a fabric and cardboard map. So Split Splat Cat Attack is a blatant copy of a game I just mentioned, Outfoxed. But instead there is art of cats drawn in pencil on little pieces of paper, and the wooden cat from Viva Topo is there, and I do not remember why it is there, but it is. So it's a mix of paper pieces that make up Outfoxed and the Viva Topo cat.
And unfortunately, you can't get those in stores.
No. The other game, from what I remember, is a bit harder to describe, but it has this map, and it had just a deck of cards, a giant plush die, plastic bugs, and cardboard Catan pieces. And this game was kind of a free-for-all RPG sort of made up on the spot game, but instead of rolling a dice like you would in a traditional RPG, you drew cards to determine how successful you were. And I think you could also craft things with the Catan resources. I distinctly remember making pasta to use as a rope once to go through a keyhole to get someone out of a door, of course. And also, I think that the plastic bugs were enemies because when I was looking at the box earlier, I found these paper like encounter cards that had like stats and attacks for the different bugs.
So I've got a question at that point. So which of the games you had as a kid were best to steal parts out of?
Okay, so Catan Jr., because it had all those pieces. Of course, the Viva Topo mouse. And then, I think those were honestly mainly the ones that I stole one from were Catan Jr. and Viva Topo. But I'm certain there must have been others that I probably stole pieces from as well.
So jumping back a bit to Outfoxed, Roger Dodger Games calls out in the chat room that he just picked up a copy for his nephew. So definitely in print and available.
Excellent.
So back to actual games that I did not make up. There are two games I want to mention with the name Labyrinth. Just Labyrinth and the Magic Labyrinth. So although they share the word labyrinth in their names, these games are completely different. Starting with just Labyrinth. This game is about searching for specific treasures in an ever-changing maze. So throughout the game, the labyrinth shifts by like sliding tiles in, and that changes the different rows and columns, moving like both players and the treasure that you're looking for. I loved this game as a kid, and I'm pretty sure if I played it now, I'd still like it. I just haven't played it in a long time. But this game was also really great for grade school because everyone always thought it looked really cool. I'd have like a crowd of classmates watching or asking what it was whenever I brought it.
Yeah, and that's the classic Ravensburger Labyrinth. I think most gamers are going to recognize that one and know that game if they see it. There are multiple different themed versions, and there's even a more advanced Master Labyrinth, which I think we own. And I'm not sure if you remember playing the original or the Master version. I don't think there were that much difference, that maybe asymmetric powers or something like that.
So I definitely played the original Labyrinth, but when looking for the box today, I saw that we do have the other one, although I do not remember that one at all. So I'm not sure I ever played Master Labyrinth, but definitely the base version.
And this Labyrinth in the past year has come out with a new English edition from Ravensburger, as well as a one-piece Labyrinth and a glow-in-the-dark Pokemon Labyrinth.
So for the second Labyrinth game, the Magic Labyrinth, this one is also about searching for treasure, but this time instead of the labyrinth moving, it has invisible walls. The walls are actually underneath the board and can be like rearranged into any pattern you like. And then the pieces above the board are magnetic and they have like a metal ball connected underneath. Therefore, when you move through a wall, the ball will like fall off and then you'll know that you've walked through an invisible wall and you have to respawn your character. And so you kind of go through trying to memorize where the walls are and collect all the treasure.
Yeah, that game was just really cool. That was another one that was recommended around the same time as Outfoxed. Again, probably the Dice Tower based on the time period, but strongly recommended. This is a game with an invisible maze. And the best part is the tactile feel, because you go to move your piece and you know when you hit that wall, you just feel it, but there's nothing in front of you, right? And of course, the first time we played with the kids, we blew them away because we didn't tell them how it works. So they were just, oh my God, what's happening? How does it work? Until they figure it out. And then you're like, oh, it's magnets.
So the latest English edition of this one was released in 2023. And in case you doubt the pedigree of this game, it was the 2009 Kinderspiel des Jahres and is number 23 on the Board Game Geek list of children's games.
Yeah, this is honestly one of my strongest recommendations out of all the games here.
So in the same art style as Magic Labyrinth, which does have very cute art, is Magician's Kitchen. So this game is about 4 wizards trying to move potion ingredients around the kitchen, and you have to put the ingredients like on top of your pieces, and then you have to gently push them around with a stick and try to like not dump the pieces onto the floor and instead dump them into corresponding cauldrons. It's like sort of color sorting and also very manual decks. It was quite fun as a kid, and I played it a lot with Eve. I probably liked it because I was better at it than her. I normally won. But the art is also very cute, and the concept and the pieces. The only issue is that I did love the game so much that our copy is basically unplayable due to how many missing pieces there are.
So one of the things, and I don't know if you realize this, it wasn't just dexterity. There were magnets in the board. So you would push your character and you would trip over cobblestones, and they would force your character to dip if you hit one of the magnets. So there was also a memorization element to the game. And it's one of the reasons you're supposed to actually rotate the board every time you play, so you never remember exactly where they are. So it's about pushing your person, or besides pushing the person around not too quick and not tipping them over, avoiding the trip holes in the ground that you eventually learn are there.
I don't think I realized there were magnets. I think I just thought I was really bad at it.
Oh, there you go.
And both this and Magic Labyrinth came from Playroom Entertainment for their English versions. Yes. And this one was nominated, Magician's Kitchen was nominated for Kenner Spiel des Jahres in 2011, but didn't win out at that time. Unfortunately, 2011 was the last time this one was released. So I'm not sure if Magician's Kitchen is going to be available.
I got to say that the production quality on these is very high, and I have to assume the cost to make them was not cheap, especially with like embedded magnets and cardboard and everything like that. And yes, I'm a quick look using my tabletop gaming skills, it shows me none available anywhere.
So next up is actually a set of 3 games that I was gifted from my dad. And that is Oi Dat's My Leg, Hungry Troll and the Gobos, and Squelch. So although I know I must have played all 3 of them, the only one I vaguely remember is Oi Dat's My Leg. And even that one I don't remember too well. What I do remember, though, is playing the games of Eve and loving them. Although I don't remember the rules, I do remember the joy of playing them and how much I loved like the art in them. And also they came with cassette tapes, and listening to those was always very interesting.
Now, here is the first game on the list that Sean and I played together growing up. So this is the first overlap for a game I played as a kid, though we were probably like 13 at the time, and games Gwen played as a kid. These were board games released by Games Workshop, officially marketed to be something to keep your kids busy while you played Warhammer. They were silly, stupid, had amusing art, and yes, each came with its own Trollish Tunes tape. As a kid, I only owned Oi Dat's Me Leg. So Gwen is literally playing the copy Sean and I used to play. And then as an adult, I suddenly realized I'm an adult with the internet. I bet you I can get the other 2 games, and did. So yes, those are the Trollish Tunes games. There are reviews of all 3 on the blog if you want more information about those.
So there is supposed to be a 4th one.
Yes, it was released after, and I have not been able to find that one.
Yeah.
So lastly, for the kiddie games on this list is Ghost Fighting Treasure Hunters. Although this game is marketed for kids, I will note that pretty much anyone of any age should enjoy this game. It is a cooperative game where you are playing as a group of kids trying to collect treasure from a haunted house. The mechanics, components, art, everything in this game is fantastic. Everyone in the family loves this game, and it's always been a favorite of mine since we got it when I was younger, although I have not had a chance to play it in quite a while.
Yeah, it was just amusing because I noticed both Sean and I both nodding emphatically when she was saying this is a great game for everyone. And I agree. Even better with the expansion, though, this one has been re-released in an anniversary edition that is different than what we own and includes new ways to play, including a player being able to play the ghost. So the version we strongly recommend is the original Ghost Fightin', not fighting. It's actually Fightin' Treasure Hunters with the creepy cellar. I've not had a chance to try the new one to see how it compares. I know it is one of those things where they lost the license to the original art, and that's why they had to republish it. So it looks completely different. Gameplay-wise, I know there's a way to play the monsters, but I don't know like if it's got the Master Spook or any of the creepy cellar stuff in there, and I'm actually curious to know. So if anyone's picked up the most recent version of Ghost Fighting Treasure Hunters, I would love a comparison to the original.
And Red Meeple Ryan in the chat is asking about the Ghostbusters version.
So the Ghostbusters version was a cheaper, more mass market, available in Target, whatever version of the game that was lesser component quality and is just the base game with no expansion. So you're getting basically the same game of lesser quality. The board's actually smaller and the pieces are smaller. So it's not even like it's compatible that you can just use the Ghostbuster pieces on the main board. So it's just like a licensed version to coincide with the new Ghostbusters movies coming out. And it was a lesser quality. To be fair, for years I recommended that one because the original Ghost Fighting Treasure Hunters was out of print. So it was better than nothing. Like it's still Ghost Fighting Treasure Hunters, which is great. But it unfortunately the quality I've heard a lot of complaints on. Like I guess it's really worse. Like thin cards that bend and fold and a smaller board and everything else.
I mean, we have been talking about Ghost Fighting Treasure Hunters ad nauseum for years on this podcast. So if you don't know about it, you might be new to our show, and we've got plenty of other episodes where we've talked about children's games as well.
I will say, going back to an older question, I do remember stealing components again for making my own games. The ghosts from Ghost Fighting Treasure Hunters, those pieces are amazing, and I would steal those. All right, so on to some games that are not actually kids' games, but I did play for the first time when I was younger. We have Splendor. So I'm assuming most people obviously already know this game, but this was the first grown-up game that I ever played. My mom taught it to me, and until maybe a couple years ago, when asked what my favorite game was, I actually would say Splendor. I really liked it when it was taught to me, and for a while I'd bring this to events at grade school, try and teach it to my friends. No one else really liked it, but I did.
Yeah, I think everyone's known mine. I just played too much Splendor. It's one of those that if I played it now, I'd probably love it because it's been long enough. But it got a lot of play around this house.
I've always been a fan of it, and I haven't overplayed it, so I never actually reached the oh my god, put it away, make it stop level. So there we go.
So lastly, after Splendor, I asked my mom, show me more games, because I'm like, whoa, this game's great. So the next bigger game that I played was Valeria Card Kingdoms. I don't think I've played this game since it was taught to me back when I was maybe 11 or 12. So I don't remember much of the actual mechanics of the game very well, but I do remember loving this game so much. And when we later started reviewing the other Valeria games, I was really excited because I was like, oh, I remember that. I remember the Valeria Card Kingdoms. So to this day, I still love almost all the Valeria games. They're really good. Valeria Card Kingdoms being the first one that I tried.
And all that says to me is we need to get together and do a 5-player game of Valeria Card Kingdoms, because I'll admit I haven't touched that copy of the game in a long time, and we still have I have the original printing. I did not, when they put out the second edition, did not jump back into the game because I had already had the original and multiple expansions. But yeah, that's a fantastic game. For a game similar to that, you also enjoyed Space Base, but that was much later. Those two have something in common with you collect cards that have numbers on them, and you roll those numbers, you get something.
And Space Base doesn't have the Dukes.
No. No. They might have fixed that in the second edition. I probably should have kept up with Valeria. I loved Valeria.
Loved Valeria, hated the Dukes. Got it wrong every single time.
Any other ones you want to mention? I'm trying to rack my head for ones I remember playing with you. Now, one I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but Mom teaching you Ingenious.
I vaguely remember. I mainly remember learning Quirkle from Mom, but I do also remember Ingenious, but not that well. I think mainly what I remember is we had the app version on the big iPad, so I would play the app version of Ingenious whenever I was on the iPad. But for other games I wanted to mention, there is Forbidden Island, which I did enjoy a lot as a kid and brought out to grade school gaming events, and I think also some high school ones. When I started off Board Game Club in 10th grade, I remember bringing Forbidden Island. I think I taught that game to my math teacher. It didn't go well. No one understood it, but I did teach it to my math teacher. There's also Rhino Hero, which I enjoyed playing with Eve, but I maybe played with the actual rules once when you taught it to us. Besides that, we just kind of liked stacking the cards to see how high we could get it. There's also Gary Gouda, which I believe was a birthday present given to Eve. And that game we didn't get out very often because it was large and heavy. So you had to get it down from the shelf for us. But I also don't think we played with the rules for this one. It just has fun doors because depending on how much cheese you have underneath your mouse, because you're trying to collect cheese, you can't fit through some of the doors. So we just kind of messed around with that instead of playing the actual game. There was also, again, I believe this might be the same company as the Magic Labyrinth and Magician's Kitchen, because it had the same art style again. But Vampires of the Night, which I don't think I ever played once with the actual rules, but it had a vampire, and there was a board with a whole bunch of garlic pieces, and you had to like put the garlic into holes using a magnet to move around your vampire character. And I just liked pushing around the vampire with a magnet because it was a bat on a stick and it was magnetic. And that was very fun and exciting to me. There was also a little bit more complicated game again, King of Tokyo, as well as we had the expansion, I believe. Yes.
Well, we had the power-up expansion, and we also had King of New York.
Mm-hmm.
But if I remember, you didn't enjoy King of New York.
I did not. But I do remember playing King of Tokyo. I do not remember the mechanics well, but I do remember enjoying that game, as well as like we had Goblet Jr., Animal Upon Animal, and I think we bought Blockus for you as a birthday gift once, which was a bit of an odd choice for something to gift to you. And that ended up on our kids' shelf because it's Blockus, but you know.
So, Animal Upon Animal, I loved. That was great.
Mm-hmm.
That never took off for you guys as much. Like you liked it. You used to have another one that was Panda Bow, I think it was called, with the roly panda that you would stack on top. But you guys played with that one, I remember more when you were very young.
Mm-hmm.
So Forbidden Island is notable because Forbidden Island is one of the things that got Eve to learn to read. Something about her reading off the cards. It really encouraged her to learn to read. So Forbidden Island has a special place in my heart. Rhino Hero, you know, we love. Gary Gouda was awesome. Gary Gouda, it's so toyetic. It's a giant mouse trap base, not mouse trap, but like a mouse maze. It's a house. And then you randomize these slots that go in the top. And then you have to go from your entrance, go into it and come back carrying pieces of cheese. But as Gwen mentioned, the doors are different sizes. And eventually you can be too fat, fit in certain doorways. So it was all about kind of memorizing and then finding the best routes. So that one was neat. Vampires in the Night was just a odd game because you were collecting garlic. So I don't know what the heck was with the theme there. But yes, he used a magnet. So you're pushing your piece with this bat. Well, the thing is your thing's a magnet. So you're just using the magnetic force to push your piece. So it's instead of using your finger. And you were kind of like on this like scaffolding above the board. And you were trying to knock the garlic off into the pits below to get points. King of Tokyo is a big hit for me. I think that's a fantastic high player count game with any number. One of the ones you didn't mention that I think is notable is Mice and Mystics. Now, Mice and Mystics is a role-playing dungeon crawler with a fantastic story of medieval characters, medieval knights, adventurers, whatever you want to call them, being turned into mice and then being hunted by the king's rats trying to save a prince who had been turned into a rat or a mouse. An awesome, amazing story. But man, that was not a kid's game. Like it had it was a kid's story book, and the theme and the story was great. But the mechanics were like they weren't Gloomhaven level, but it was a complicated dungeon crawler. So that one I made a mistake with by introducing you guys too early, and we just never got back to it. We still to this day we should go this weekend and play some Mice and Mystics because you never got to experience that one.
Yeah, I thought of a couple other games. There was also Bugs in the Kitchen, and we had the like storybook Tortoise and the Hare game. Yep. Though I'm not sure we ever ended up playing that one. I liked how it looked. I liked the box because it was book shaped. But I don't remember ever playing that one. Bugs in the Kitchen though did get a lot of play, especially adding in random hex bugs just from our collection and just swarming the kitchen with bugs because why not? But that one is like you're moving, turning utensils in the kitchen to try and guide bugs into like little traps on either side. And it's got hex bugs in it. So it's very exciting as a kid because they're moving and it's fun.
Yeah, Bugs in the Kitchen, that was one I did not enjoy playing with you guys. It was just basically random. The hex bug would move around, you'd roll a thing, and it'd be like, you can turn a fork, and you're just trying to turn it so it gets in the opponent's goal. That one wasn't for me. Tortoise and the Hare, you definitely did play a few times. I just didn't take to it much. It's actually a really good racing game, and it's one of those, like, you pick a character, and you're playing sets of cards, and you play Tortoise cards, you, of course, move slow, but you can play lots of them. Where Hare cards, you move really fast, but if you push your luck too much, you have to sleep, and so on. That was actually a really neat game. It was from the Tales and Games series. Another one you had in that was Baba Yaga. And I remember when I'm asking, like, hey, can you clean off yourself? You want to donate anything? It was like the first one you gave me. So you guys obviously didn't like Baba Yaga.
Deanna spoke very highly about Tortoise and the Hare in one episode. I clearly remember talking about those storybook games and her memories of them when you guys were kids.
Now, one I haven't heard you mention that I know you guys loved was Go Cuckoo.
Yes, we do both love Go Cuckoo, and it is a game we still play pretty frequently. I think it got played this week. So we played a lot as a family when we first got it, and it's been a hit at like Board Game Club at school, and I've even taught it at some of the Walkerville Brewery events. But yeah, that one is very fun.
So one thing I noticed that several times has come up now is Playroom Entertainment games. Now, unfortunately, Playroom Entertainment has been sucked up into the conglomerate that is Ultra Pro, and currently their website, their web store isn't even online. So I'm not quite clear what's going on. There are no official releases for Playroom Entertainment since 2021, I think. But if you get a chance and you've got kids, do go look at some of the honors that have been lauded onto Playroom Entertainment games over the years as children's games. The number of nominations for Kinderspiel des Jahres, winners of Kinderspiel des Jahres, and just great games with this great art style that Gwen, had repeatedly said, oh, this is from the same place. Yes, those are from Playroom Entertainment, all those games.
Yeah, there was one about a ghost on a ladder or going up a stairwell that you also had from that series of games. I think those were the four we had. And I can't remember the name of the one with the ghost going up the stairwell. If I remember, it wasn't the most fun out of all of them.
I think we might have donated that one sooner than the others. I don't really remember that one too well. I will say I thought of a game that I specifically played with you. It was the Star Wars dice one that we were playing for a while. What was that called? Because we played that for a while when I was younger. Star Wars Destinies? Star Wars something. But it was the dice Destiny. One, right? Yeah.
Not Destinies, just Destiny. Star Wars Destiny, a collectible dice game that was actually more of a card game, but also used dice. It was interesting. The problem was it was collectible. It was a TCG basically, and it was part of the same time Dice Masters came up, which we played that quite a bit too with the Marvel Dice Masters. But you liked the Star Wars one more. Star Wars Destinies was a lot of fun, but I just wasn't willing to keep up with the release schedule and all the collectible stuff.
I think that was around the same time where we also tried out Hero Clicks and stuff and some other collectible games.
Yeah.
Which were fun, but they didn't get that much play after a short span of time where we played them.
All right.
No, I agree.
We had a couple of comments come in earlier in the chat room when you were discussing about the games you made yourself, asking if you have heard about a site called The Game Crafter. And there's also Component Studio, which is tied to Game Crafters, or you can print out some of your parts at home if you are interested in continuing with your game design career. Next up, though, people want to know, what is your favorite of all the games you played growing up, if you can pick one?
So I always have a very hard time choosing favorites, but if I had to specify, I would say that it would definitely be either Magician's Kitchen or The Magic Labyrinth. Those games, they just had the best concept and they were the most replayable. I went back and played those games over and over again. They would keep me occupied for a longer time. I could play them with Eve. I could make up my own solo versions. They were some of the best games that I remember.
Totally fair. All right. Well, those are the games you enjoyed while growing up. What about now? You are in a house with hundreds of board games, possibly well over hundreds of board games. What would you say are your top 5 games right now?
With so many games to choose from and playing new games all the time, it is very hard for me to make a specific list of favorites. But right now, I would probably say Eclipse Second Dawn for the Galaxy. This game is killer. Monstrosity, Star Explorer, and Star Trek Super Skill Pinball. But if you ask me this question tomorrow, I may have completely different answers. I don't know.
Star Trek Super Skill surprised me on that list. Have you played that one recently?
No, but I tried to. I brought it out to a board game club and no one wanted to play it with me.
Okay.
But I've tried. I've tried to get people to play it.
So similar topic, and I realize we're now talking about high schoolers at this point. What would you say are the most popular games at your game club? So you run the board game club at Walkerville Collegiate, which is a local art high school, where all the weird kids go. What are the most popular games there right now?
So I would say that the most popular categories are obviously light party games. We have a short time limit, so we haven't really been able to play anything heavier, especially if you've got anything D&D based, that will get people interested because most people know what D&D is. So Kiss the Goblin, Dubious, Adventure Party, and other games like that always get told to be brought back. This game is killer, as well as drawing games like Telestrations, Monstrosity, and Caution Signs are all very popular. Manual Dex games, specifically Catch the Moon and Go Cuckoo, tend to be popular as well. And I've brought in a couple 2-player games that are popular, like Boop, and I believe Aquilin has also been played a couple times. Hues and Cues and the Chameleon are both very popular at Board Game Club. Hues and Cues actually was how we got a couple of our members spotted us with a copy of Hues and Cues and ended up joining Board Game Club and now are some of our regulars. Yeah, there's probably others I'm not thinking of right now, but those are most the ones that I try and bring in like every week.
It's funny because that list sounds a whole lot like what gets played every single month at Walkerville.
Yes.
So adults and high schoolers are really going for those same games. When the last time you brought out Hues and Cues, it was on the table, and every time it was on the table and someone came over to the table, they took it away from the table. That game, it's not really for me, but it is wildly popular. I don't know how it got the mass market appeal that it got.
TikTok, at least for high schoolers.
Okay.
I will say people have mentioned, oh, I saw someone play this. Oh, I watched a streamer play this. Oh, I saw it online. When they spot it at Board Game Club, they'll be like, I saw this game online. I really want to try that. It was the same thing with the Chameleon. Both Hues and Cues and the Chameleon were games that people had seen online and seen other people play it and wanted to try.
There.
So before we move on, do we have anything else from the chat?
So Roger was asking about Robot Turtles. Have you played any of the Robot Turtle games?
Yes, we did. We did play Robot Turtles. I really liked Robot Turtles as a kid. It was a very good, like, beginning, like, programming type game. I have not played it probably since.
The problem with Robot Turtles. The problem with Robot Turtles is it was fantastic, but there was only one scenario in the base box, and it left you to do the rest. And like when you were younger, it would be up to the parents to come up with new programs, or it was up to like it was a great sandbox of a game, but they didn't quite give you enough tools to tell you what to do with it. Like I just felt that games could have been so much more if it was released, like, you know, like one of those logic puzzle games with 100 different puzzles in it and they get harder as you go. I think would have been better than what they did give you, which is this: here's a programming toolkit and here's one scenario to play with it, and now it's up to you to do the rest. Like I just felt that one was a missed opportunity. Now that said, that one game that's in there, the kids had a great time with, and I do remember them making programs for each other, where like one kid would make a maze, the other one had to get the robot through it, and then the other kid would make a maze and get the robot through it.
I will say for other like programming based games, didn't we try slightly more recently? It had monkeys and bananas. What was that called?
Code Monkeys Going Bananas, which launched on Kickstarter and failed to fund. So that never became reality.
Well, that game was really good, but obviously can't get that one.
You can check out our preview if anyone else is looking to pick up the license or maybe do something with it.
What else we got here? Roger was mentioning that Spot It is great for little kids.
Did you play Spot It?
We did have a copy of Spot It. I think we had 2 copies of Spot It, but the cards got lost very quickly. So we ended up with like half a copy of Spot It that we didn't know the rules to because we lost the rules. So it was more what we thought the rules to Spot It were. And I will say that I found Spot It in a classroom at school slightly recently, read the rules, and realized I was playing wrong for large portions of my life. It's a little bit of a simple game to mess up, but when you don't have any expectation of what the rules are, yeah.
Because all Spot It actually is a deck of cards where every card has something in common with every other card in the deck. That's it. That's the special thing. And there's at least there's different rules you can play. Like one is just first person to spot it, spots it. The other is there was 4 or 5 different variants of what to do with that deck. But the whole key of Spot It is every single card has something in common with every other card in the deck. And it changes what that is.
Ryan was asking, have you played, when you're talking about King of Tokyo, have you played King of New York?
So we did have King of New York, and I did not like it. I liked King of Tokyo, but I did not like King of New York. Due to that, I think I may have erased it from my memory because I do not remember why I did not like it. I just remember not liking it.
Totally fair. Now, I think I've played it. I've played it with you. Robot Quest Arena, your thoughts?
So I definitely love that game. I've only gotten a chance to play it about twice, although I do see it getting played a lot at the Walkerville game events.
Mhm.
And it was very fun to play as a family the couple times I have been able to play it. I think it would definitely work really great as a kid's game, and I probably would have played it more if I had been given that game at a younger age.
Yeah, unfortunately, it didn't exist. So,
And then Roger is saying Invasion of the Cow Snatchers is a great puzzle game.
Do not know that one. I don't think I've ever heard of that one.
All right.
I do have Red Meeple Ryan was asking if you ever played Hero Quest.
I thought we covered that one. Sorry.
I recognize the name and I've immediately forgotten if I've played that.
All right.
Which is that the wait. Is that the one we got maybe a couple years ago? The draw a card and draw on the map one?
No.
No, that's a different game.
No, so this was a game that I grew up playing that I used to play when I was dating your mom, and before that actually, but played through the whole campaign with your mom. And it's an adventure game, and then they recently Hasbro republished it in deluxe edition, and you and your sister and your mom got it for me for Christmas, and we sat down and played once and lost very horribly, and Eve refused to ever play again. If I remember that first game, you decided to be the barbarian and run off on your own, even though I kept telling you that doesn't really work in this game.
I remember now. Yeah, that game did not go over very well. I think that might be why I don't remember it, but I think maybe if we replayed it, it might be a bit of a different experience now. If you could convince Eve to play it again.
And
Eve does not enjoy cooperative
playing
games.
it. We were a little older when we first got to Hero Quest, and then you sort of your marriage developed playing Hero Quest.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, there you have it. A bunch of great kids games and family game recommendations from someone who grew up playing games. I don't think we can get a better source than that.
Thanks for joining us and letting us know about your favorite games, Gwen. How about you folks listening? What were your favorite games growing up? We would love to hear about it in the comments on social media, where we can be found as Tabletop Bellhop, one word, pretty much everywhere, or through email, mo@tabletopbellhop.com.
And now a message from our sponsor, Grand Gamers Guild.
So this past weekend, the family and I saved the sea turtles in a really close game of Endangered, playing with one of the expansion species from the New Species box set for that fantastic cooperative game. We had a great time, and even Eve, who's not a big cooperative game fan, did enjoy that.
So today we are pleased to announce a new expansion for Endangered Australia, which will be coming soon to Kickstarter.
This new expansion features 3 scenarios: Koala, Giant Barred Frog, and the Great Barrier Reef. A new role, the Prime Minister, with powerful game-changing actions and some other surprises that will be revealed once the campaign is live.
Way to tease us, Mark. Well, if you don't have Endangered yet, honestly, if you like cooperative games at all, go pick it up. It's honestly one of the best cooperative games we played. You can get it at your friendly local game store or direct from Grand Gamers Guild, where you can always use our code BELLHOP, BELLHOP, to save 10%.
After you do that, or if you already have the game, follow the link in the show notes, which we're also dropping in chat, and click Notify Me on launch.
Welcome to the Bellhop Tabletop, where we talk about the games that we've been playing lately. I've actually been playing some games lately, although mostly digital. Not completely. We did actually get a real physical game played last night.
Yes.
But other than that, on Board Game Arena, I have been playing Haggis, which has been going on. I mean, this game has been going on for years now. It just keeps restarting. King of Tokyo has been getting played recently. As well, I re-upped the Dominion app to start playing that again. And they now have a campaign game where if you buy any of the expansions, you can start taking part in a campaign. As well, Clank on Steam is a fantastic implementation. I haven't delved deep into it yet, pardon the pun, but the first time I played it was great and really gave you the feel of the actual physical board games. As well, Star Realms. I think all of us have been playing digitally of late. So there's that too.
Yeah, to be fair, two of those I've also been playing. Most recently, we had a 3-player game of Dominion played with Gwen and Eve. It was Eve's first time ever playing the game, and I think she picked it up pretty quickly. Though her strategy didn't really work out. But, if you don't know Dominion well, buying all the, I forget what it was. It was
the gardens. She bought all the gardens.
Gardens, yeah. It was one of the in-game scoring cards you could buy that didn't do anything, just scored, and it was worth 1 point per 10 cards you have. But I think in the end of the game, they scored her 3 points total. Because it should have been more than that, though. I don't know. The app keeps track of the score. So, yeah, we've also been playing the Dominion app and Star Realms as well. I recently hooked Gwen up with my account so that she could use the content I paid for.
I convinced my friends to play at school. I got a couple people to play. One person did not understand it. And the other was someone who had played the physical copy with me at a cafe in the past. So they understood it and ended up actually beating me. So, yeah, it was lots of fun.
Yeah, I honestly think that one, yes, you can play digital, but man, does it help having played just once in person, right? You need to take one Star Realms deck, show them how to play, and then go, okay, here, it's online. Now that you've seen it, it is a little rough. And I remember over the years trying to introduce it to coworkers and people who aren't really board gamers, and some people getting it and many people not. Now, before Deanna's eye surgery, we did celebrate her birthday. This included a fantastic meal at Wolfhead Distillery, which was followed by a trip to the Cookie Bar. For anyone in Windsor who hasn't been to the Cookie Bar, you need to go. They're on Droulard. They're amazing. While there, we played some silly games that they happen to have on hand. Yes, they have board games there. The selection's rather unique. The first one, though, is Inner Circle. Now, Deanna and I talked about this one before on the podcast for a previous trip to the Cookie Bar. I couldn't tell you which episode, but I could probably look it up. But I'm not going to. This is a very toyetic game from 1981 where you have a multi-layered board and you're moving your pawns around the board on circles, and the spot you end on tells you how many spots you can move, and you're trying to end up on the holes on the board where there's gaps. Once every hole on the board is claimed, you actually lift the current board off, which removes all the pieces that didn't make it to the holes. And you do that for 3 more boards until the last layer where there's only one hole in the inner circle. The last person standing wins. It's gimmicky and fun. We ended up playing 2 games of this one, and the kids were with us. So both kids played as well. What did you think of Inner Circle, a game much older than you are?
So on the first play, I did not understand the rules. Specifically, I kept getting confused by the fact that I could only move in a straight line. For some reason, I thought that I just got to move 4 spaces in any direction. And that is not how it works. So I was eliminated pretty quickly in that game and got to watch the rest of you guys play, which helped me figure out what I was misunderstanding. So on the second time playing, now that I knew what I was doing, I did enjoy it quite a lot and ended up winning, actually. And I love the concept, but normally I do not like games with player elimination. I will say this time, since we were at the Cookie Bar, I'm not sure that was a problem because I got to eat my cookie. But I think if we were playing it somewhere where I didn't have a cookie to preoccupy me, I would have been a little annoyed with the player elimination.
Yeah, nobody's really a big fan of player elimination in the 21st century, but it was a pretty common theme in a lot of 20th century board games. Thankfully, we have evolved.
See, honestly, I think this one would go over pretty well at Walkerville, but the difference is if you're eliminated, you just go play something else with a different group.
Mm-hmm. So while we were still at the Cookie Bar, and we finished playing Inner Circle, we had asked Eve, hey, go pick out a game from the shelf. And she couldn't pick one. And then she eventually came back with a copy of Rock'em Sock'em Robots. The copy that they had, though, was sort of broken. So it was rigged in a way that basically only blue could win, because red just moving at all would make their head go up. And no matter how hard you punched blue, the head tended to get stuck. But we did still have fun playing with it for a bit.
It's hard not to enjoy robots beating up robots. I mean, the movies have been made about this. It's
true. And to be fair, this was not the classic Rock'em Sock'em Robots I grew up with. This was some cheap knockoff, no-name brand version. where you actually couldn't maneuver the robots, like their fists couldn't go past each other. So it was just basically a button masher that was broken because one head stuck more than the other. But I gotta admit, like, the kids kept themselves occupied probably for an hour with this silly game, so they were having enough fun with it.
It was also late and we had cookies, so
there you go. They had a couple other silly games too. Like they had one of those silly ring on the hook games, but that one was kind of broken because one of the strings wasn't the right length to actually like get caught. And we were spending way too long fiddling with it and trying to get the hooks to catch. And one of those elastic band games where you're like flicking discs, trying to get all your discs on the opponent's side. Not our usual, board game night, but you know what? It was quite fun. And their cookies are really good.
Mm-hmm. I did not really like the hook game. I was kind of annoyed by it, but that might have been because it was not working. I just felt like I could never get it to work, except then we'd swap sides and it would work. So I do think it may have been because it was just a broken version. I did really like the little elastic disc shooting game, though, but no one wanted to play against me because I kept winning. So I did just play solo, trying to shoot all the discs through like as quickly as possible. Then I'd turn the board around and just repeat that over and over again.
Yeah, and just to a point, we were talking about how the circle game was Inner Circle is older than Gwen. Rock'em Sock'em Robots is actually older than all of us. Rock'em Sock'em Robots goes back to 1964. So,
yeah. Though again, you couldn't even part the robots. You couldn't get their fists past each other. It was like just such a sham version of Rock'em Sock'em Robots. It was disappointing, and I don't know what you call the flick game. I don't know. They're available from multiple Chinese sellers on Amazon, whatever the heck it's called. I think I've seen like Slap Shot and Fast Shot and Hockey or something like that. The same weekend, we were over at Brenda's and we played multiple rounds of Sonoda, trying it out at different player counts. And this has to do with us covering cons and the order of our episodes coming out. We actually really talked about this last week. This is the Canadian abstract strategy game from BS Games that uses D4s, where your basic rules are move a die its value or roll the die up and down by one and leave it where it is. And when you capture another opponent's die, it's worth its point value. Game's been a big hit. Just reviewed it last week. So if you want more info on Sonoda, check out episode 270. Do you have anything to add about Sonoda now?
So like I said last time, I do think it was better at 3 players than at 4 players because it was very hard to interact with the player across from you in 4 players. So I will say 3 players, much better when we were playing at MIMS. I definitely preferred that to the 4-player game, but there's nothing that worked better.
What'd you like better, 3 or 2, though? Because 2 I found super cutthroat.
I think I might have preferred 3 just because, I don't know, it felt more... I feel like there's not much you can really do in 2 if you're losing, whereas in 3 players, you can just like kind of swap to attacking the other person, like change where you're heading. Whereas in 2, you really only have that one goal to try and head for. So another game that we did end up playing while we were at MIMS was a 4-player game of Mackie Master. And this was actually my sister Eve's first time playing the game. So today I asked her, and I was like, hey, what did you think of that when we played it? And she said that the game was really good. Specifically, she liked the sushi theming and the mechanics of the teacups. And of course, the game made her hungry for sushi with all of the delicious art of the unique different rolls. I had played the game a few times before, but not at that player count. And I did think it worked really well with 4 players.
So now that you've played a few sushi games, do you have a favorite of the sushi-themed games?
I'm trying to think of any other sushi-themed games.
Sushi Dice.
Sushi Boat.
Yeah.
Sushi Boat.
That too. I think Mackie Master is probably the best of those. Sushi Dice is more silly. And Sushi Boat was fine. I liked it, and the memory aspect was fun. I just think I would prefer to play Mackie Master between the 2.
Next up, more Mackie Master. This time solo. So before we did our review, again, episode 270, last episode, we did our full review. I wanted to make sure we tried it solo before doing the review, and I played the first time and lost, even though I was on the normal difficulty or the easy. It wasn't the simple, it was the normal difficulty. Then I asked Gwen to give it a try. And I was just going to sit back and like watch her and get her feelings. But in the end, the 2 of us just kind of teamed up and worked together to barely steal a win. And I got to say, as appropriate for a solo mode, it was nice and difficult. And it took some work to get that win.
Yeah, the solo rules were really simple and easy to understand, but very hard to win. You definitely need to make like combos and do multiple rolls at once to be able to physically meet the win conditions. And like when I'm playing a regular 4-player game, I tend to never make combinations. I'm like, I'll try, but then it won't happen. So you definitely need to get good at that if you're going to be playing the solo version, because you need to be able to win.
So since we were last here, since you were on the show and you do run the board game club at your school, how was board game club this week?
So this week we were missing a few key members because we had some people who were sick. So we ended up splitting off into 3 smaller groups, 2 groups of 2 and 1 group of 4. The groups of 2 were playing Go Cuckoo and the other was playing Crystallized. So I can't really say much about the games of Crystallized or Go Cuckoo as I didn't play them. I was part of the group of 4, but it seems like Go Cuckoo went really well because it was requested for me to bring it back another time. Although I have brought it in the past. So yeah, continuing to be recommended for me to bring that one back.
Yeah, Go Cuckoo seems like it's always a hit. Crystallize is a solid game. That one was better than I expected. I'm glad you're getting play out of it. It's not the kind of thing I can like, mom's not going to sit down and play that with us very often. But for something that honestly we found at Dollarama, I think it's pretty awesome. And man, once upon a time, like I almost forgot we owned that game. Like I don't think anyone's touched that copy in years.
Mm-hmm. So I was part of the group that played Once Upon a Time, which sort of relates to our topic today because actually it was a game that Mom gave to me as a kid that I never bothered to read the rules and liked to sit and look at the pretty pictures for hours and make my own stories, which I guess is kind of in like the spirit of the game, as I was still storytelling in my head for hours alone. But so this was the first time that I had ever played it with the actual rules and with other people. So it was really fun. We played 3 short rounds over the span of approximately an hour, and everyone seemed to have a great time.
So that gets to one of the Bellhop rules there. Hey, playing a game by the actual rules is fun. Who knew? So for anyone who doesn't know Once Upon a Time, this is a classic game. Now, not as classic as Rock'em Sock'em Robots or Inner Circle. This one's from Atlas Games going back to the 90s. Can you kind of describe how the game plays?
All right, so you're given a hand of story cards and an ending card. And you have to tell a story by mentioning the different cards you have in your hand. So you'll be like, oh, there once was a village with a princess. And if you have the princess card, you can play that. And your goal, get down to no cards and play your ending. But if you mention while you're storytelling something that someone else has the card for, so again, there was a village and there was a princess in it, someone got the village card, they can interrupt you and be like, hey, I have that card. And they take over and then tell their version of the story, continuing from there. There's also a special type of card called the interrupt card that you can interrupt a storyteller when they play a card of the matching type during their time when they play one of their cards, if it matches. So like I said, goal, get to the end. And once you played all your cards, you can try and play your ending card. But if the story doesn't line up to be able to meet your ending card, then you have to draw more cards and keep telling until it does fit your ending card. Like, I don't know, if it was True Love Breaks the Curse and you're currently at a murder scene, but you've played all your cards, I don't think True Love is solving murder. So,
So this one's had 3 major editions and actually 3 printings of the 3rd edition. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to get it now because the last English printing was back in 2015. But the game is still being developed in other languages. In 2020, there was a Korean edition released. And there have been changes throughout the editions with new rule sheets as well between the different editions.
This one, we've got the original printing going way back. I think you can get it most places nowadays. And I think we also had the Dark Tales expansion, but that was probably just mixed in.
Dark Cults, I think.
Dark Cults? No, it was Dark Tales. Once Upon a Time, Dark Tales.
I will say.
It was a neat game. I stopped bringing it out to public play events that I was hosting at the time because there were gamers there. and they were Euro gamers, and they played to win. And that game is not fun when you play it to win, because then you're just like, I was in the village with my princess who was standing on the shore by a boat, and she jumped in the boat and left, and she wanted to be alone, so she lived happily ever after. I win. Like, that literally happened with one local gamer. So we actually stopped bringing that one out, and maybe we should bring that out to Walkerville, because we do get a strong like story gamer role player group out there, and I think it would be popular.
I'm sorry, Dark Cults is a different storytelling game, the same concept, but for Dark Cults.
Okay.
Mentioning changes in the rulebook, I will point out, reading the original rulebook, there were two very interesting lines in there. One being that the first player was supposed to be determined by who had the longest beard. And that if someone was ever rambling in their story, you were supposed to shout "you silly" at them, and then have them draw cards. And I just thought those were very fun touches in the rulebook.
John hates the beard rule. Now, this past weekend, we got 2 games to the table. First was a very satisfying game of Moonlight Market from Queen Games. This is one Deanna and I brought back from Adam, and one of 3 of those new Queen small box games that we talked about during our Adam coverage. This is a neat game. It's a bidding and set collection game about building necklaces. It features open bidding, where you've got a hand of cards, and you have cards number 1 to 13 in your deck, but you're only drawing 4, so you don't know exactly what anyone has. And you're just open placing, I want that pillow full of jewels. And then the next player plays and goes, I want that pillow, but they can outbid anyone who's already there. And if you get outbid, you get this little seal token, but then have to replace your card. You can't play a different one from your hand. And it's actually a really solid version of a bidding game. Like, it's a really neat bidding mechanic. I really like that. I didn't see anything quite like that before. Now, the set collection is you're going to take your jewels, and if you have too many jewels on a necklace, if you have like 4 pieces, it breaks and falls apart, and you got to start over, and you carry over your gems between the rounds. And we'll get into all that if I ever get to a full review. At the end of each round, though, what you're going to get points on isn't necessarily like exactly what you collected, but it's majorities for each of the different gem types. And there's like 5 different colors. So it's who has the most red gems right now, who has the most in their total of blue gems, and who has the most in their total of white, which was actually really neat. And then there's also majority scoring at the end of the game based on how many of those seals you've collected, basically how many times you got bumped, as well as there's a couple other ways to get them, and your leftover bidding card, because there's one card you won't use during the entire hand. And I've got to say, every time I play the game, I always save like my 13, but then that last round, there's always something I want to win, and I end up using it, and I don't end up winning the bidding. So we really like this at Adam, and I got to say, it went over really well with the family. Brenda, in particular, seemed to really like it, as did Gwen.
I did. So, although I may be biased because I won, at the start, I thought that if I played well enough, my necklace would just never break, which was not the case. Throughout the rounds, you end up getting too many gems, meaning that at some point your necklace is going to break, and you should probably plan for that and not be like, I've got the perfect necklace. Oh, there's more gems. So my strategy, though, was to quickly get like a couple high scoring colors and then make sure to try and never break those ones, which scored me some pretty good points throughout the game, as I had like 2 consistent first place colors, which ended up winning me the game.
What I liked in this one, too, a lot is the not the player interaction, but the fact you have to pay attention to what the other players have. And there's a big, like, you can hate draft in a way. You're like, I'm going to make sure I bump you because you're going to have to take this one, not because I don't want it, but because it's going to give you too much and it's going to force you to break. And there was a lot of interplay between the players and watching what other people are collecting and what they're going for. And I don't know, it's just a really good, really solid game that feels like a bigger game than it is, because it's one of the friends and family small box, super accessible games from Queen.
Well, now, we earlier talked about the new expansion for Australia that's coming out for Endangered, and that one's not out yet, but there are still expansions that you guys hadn't played yet, right?
Yeah, there's the entire big box new species expansion. So been meaning to get to this one for a very long time. Finally got it to the table for the first time. Now, there's a bunch of stuff in this. It's called the big box expansion for a reason, because I actually think there's probably more content in this box than the base game. Now, you still need the base game because it's got the board and the dice and the different character roles, but there's so much new content in this game from the original. Now, the original game, you can check out our Endangered review. It is you are saving either otters or tigers. Well, we'll break it down a bit here. So one of the things you're going to get is new ability cards for every role in the game. So in the base game, every role has 2 cards and they're double-sided and you have to pick which one to use. Now you're getting a whole new card, so a whole new ability. And what I said was, hey, to try to review this, we're going to make sure everyone has to use the new card for this game. Mm-hmm. And they seem pretty good. Like I didn't have any complaints about the role cards. I liked mine. They seem to be quite a few that let you mitigate the dice rolls, which was nice to see.
Yeah, I don't think I ever actually ended up using my roll. My roll allowed me to like discard a card to flip a die, consequently changing its value. I don't think there was any problem with my roll, obviously. I just don't think a scenario ever came up where I wanted to use it.
Now, the other thing you get is new ambassadors, and I was actually really happy for this one. The ambassador roles had gotten, I wouldn't call them stale, but they got predictable. There were certain types that you could guarantee you were going to win. You could just stack enough cubes on them, and they used random dice, but you didn't have to worry about the rolls of the dice if you just kind of min-maxed them. And every time we played the game and won, that's what we did, is to make sure that, like, all right, we've got those 3 down. Now we just have to figure out one of the other ones. Well, this maxed this up quite a bit. There was quite a few different things on the new cards, and we mixed them in. And with our game of, so you always have 7 ambassadors out, we had 4 out of the 7 were new from the expansion. And I got to say, I like these. Like, there were more varieties, there were different types of goals, and things were a little less predictable. Like, there was no guaranteed win, which I liked.
So I did enjoy the new ambassadors. A couple had like very funky win conditions. Like, I believe there was one that was the number of dice on the starting actions at the end of the round.
Yeah. Which
was very different from anything that we had seen in the original set of ambassadors.
Yeah, they were more variable, like they would change, right? So we actually had a reason to use basic actions instead of card actions just to get that one condition. But then if we weren't guaranteed the vote that turn, were we wasting our actions when we could have done better things? So it was definitely kind of interesting. That was Pakistan, if I remember correctly, which is one of the new purple or black ambassadors. As for what scenario we played, we left that one up to Eve, because Eve is not a big fan of cooperative games normally. So to encourage them to play, we let her pick who we would try to save, and she chose the sea turtles. Now, again, I'm not going to go over the rules for Endangered. Check out our review for that. What I want to cover is what's unique for the turtles. So you start off with a row of turtles on the 4 spot, and it's like 2 turtles, 1 turtle, 2 turtles, 1 turtle, and you're 1 spot away from the edge of the board. Well, in this, that edge of the board exists as a spot that the creatures can move to, the turtles can move to. It's considered the shore, and you use, of course, the water side of the board that you normally would use for the otters. Well, what happens is the offspring phase from the original rules is tossed out. Instead, every offspring phase, every turtle on the board moves 1 square forward towards the shore. If they end up on the shore, you put them temporarily off the board, right, on the shore graphic. Then every mated pair produces an extra turtle, and you put it there with them. Then you take every turtle on the shore, and you, including the offspring, and you put them back out to sea in the furthest column. And then again, in future offspring phases, they're going to keep moving in. Now for devastation, the devastation tiles in this one were pollution. And what you got to do is you don't roll twice to figure out what grid square they end on. Instead, you pick 1 row with at least 1 turtle on it, and then roll the die and place the water pollution tile on that spot. Any turtles there are lost. If you roll a 6, you got to choose the spot. And if you rolled somewhere where there are already some, it goes to the closest turtle. The impact deck was pretty much the same as the ones in the other game. They're all unique based on which which species you're trying to save. Not monsters, no monsters in this game. Which species you're trying to save. And it was the usual mix of good and bad things. So it felt like this one had more permanence, lots of stuff that stayed in play, and then things that keyed off how many permanents were played. And there were a ton that would wipe out all turtles at the end of your turn. It would be like, pick a spot on the board, wipe out every turtle there. Doesn't matter how many there were. Those were devastating. And there were multiples in the deck.
They were. And I believe there was also some that were like, when you get rid of a bad card, like from the impact deck, then you also have to kill turtles, and even
Yes.
killing that card would kill turtles. So there were so many that just got rid of your turtles, but I also feel like the turtles were multiplying very fast.
Yes.
So I think it was kind of equal in like turtles being produced, turtles being killed. Yeah.
That's kind of how turtles work. They have a lot of kids and they just hope some of them make it to the ocean to swim away.
Yep.
So the interesting thing about this one is it actually only has 6 scenarios, but it has 7 species. And that's because while you get the elephants, polar bears, California condors, sea turtles, and the rare devil's hole pupfish, you also get jaguars and tapirs, which are a interconnected predator-prey species that involve each other. So you are getting the extra species for these 6 scenarios. Now, there's also a policy change variant included in this box. Did you try that, or?
No. I don't even remember reading a policy change variant. So,
all right, well, something else to look forward to as we
something
play
I'll
more.
have to look into. Yeah, I like the scenario. I thought it was really neat. Again, Sean already basically called it out. What I think is coolest about this is just how thematic the various scenarios are. Like the butterfly expansion is still one of my favorites, where it's just so ridiculously bonkers the way they move. Like you drop them as like a dry drop table because butterflies kind of fly erratically all over the place. Well, this one had the whole sea turtles having to reach the shore to have babies and then go back out, and you had this very wave feel, like an ocean wave, right? You had waves of turtles just coming in and trying to make it to the store, but getting caught up in all of the plastic and pollution and killing them off. And I just thought that felt really neat. And there was just a good flow to the scenario. And I got to say, the difficulty felt pretty much right. What you tend to get in Endangered, because we're like, man, we got so many turtles. We can't even have babies. There's so many turtles on the board. And then the last turn of the game, we had 3 turtles in one spot. And if we had rolled the wrong number on the die, those turtles would have died and we would have lost. So it was definitely had that same ramp up we've gotten from every other game of Endangered.
I really liked the new turtle scenario. It was very different, not using a die to decide if babies were spawned, and instead just knowing they would consistently occur every single time that a pair reached the beach. It was also interesting having like a very directional movement compared to some of the others that we've played, because like the tigers, they really only move when you move them. The butterflies were everywhere. The otters were like, yeah. So the turtles being very directional was different because it was a little bit harder to move them up and down. You tended to just have a row of turtles and they would just move over.
So our plan now is, of course, to play through. I don't know if we'll get through all 7 new species and all 6 scenarios before a final review, but I would like to try at least a couple more over the next couple of weeks. Then we'll do a full review, and I'll be sure to check out that variant because I honestly have to double check the rule book for that one. Now, up next is a 2-player game that I actually played with Sean. The 2 of us got together. Actually, all 3. Deanna was with us, but unfortunately, Deanna's eyes weren't good enough to be able to play games. And we were just sitting and talking and having some coffee and some treats at a local place. And then I broke out Earth from Inside Up Games. I've been itching to show this game off to Sean because I think he would like it. We have been loving this game since Breakout Con. I feel guilty that it took us so long to get to this game. It's been on our pile of shame for far too long. Earth is a fantastic game, and I'm probably preaching to the choir. And I thought Sean would dig it, even though it's not a sci-fi game.
Yeah, no, this game is really solid. I hesitate to say things like this, but it sort of feels a little bit like a Terraforming Mars killer. The thing about Terraforming Mars is you need to play it a lot. You need to learn the game. You need to learn all the different combos and things that are going on. There is an education that builds up, that improves your play within Terraforming Mars. This game has the engine building wonder of Terraforming Mars. And there are certainly once you start recognizing cards, there are things that will help you. But the mechanics are all right there from the start. You don't have to worry about, on these cards over here, there's some strange bacteria buildup. And over here, there's, if you get these cards, you might deal with some animals. No, all your mechanics are right there on pretty much all your cards right from the start. And that makes it really accessible for people right off the bat. I think if I hadn't actually misunderstood a rule and played the first 5 rounds wrong, I might have won. But no, it's a very solid game.
Yeah, unfortunately, we did play Extreme. I'm sure I missed it when I was doing the teach, but Sean was not activating his cards when I chose the abilities. He was just doing the lesser version of the action. So something to watch for. I should have taken more time and paid attention. Usually when I teach the game, I make everyone play in, like, we don't play simultaneous. We let you go do your thing and explain it. You do your thing and explain it. Probably should have done that. But Sean like picked up the game instantly, like super quick. Like I'm halfway through explaining, I can tell he's already got it. So I was like, oh, you got it. You do your thing. I'm going to do my thing. Plus, I'm just excited to play. I really like that game. And I had my own thing going on. I was worried about my own cards and what I was going to do.
My mistake was I was thinking Roll for the Galaxy or, where, Race for the Galaxy, where, you get to do a little thing when somebody else plays their turn, but you don't get to do the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's where I made my mistake.
But yeah, Earth is great. Like there's a review. I don't need to do a full review, do I? Like it's just awesome. Gwen, you played Earth. What'd you think of Earth?
I have. Although I cannot compare it to Terraforming Mars at all, since I've never played that game. I did really like Earth. I thought that it was very easy to understand. And I really liked how it was one of those games where you could all play at once and you never really have time where you're just sitting there like, okay, I'm just sort of waiting. I already know what I'm doing. I'm like, no, you're always doing things, which I thought was really great. And I like the theming. I think that the art in it, although it's just plants, it's still very pretty. Like the animals and the plants and the habitats all look really nice. I love the aesthetic of the game. I like the components. I like the mechanics. Yeah, it's a good game.
I think my only complaint is just how much room it takes up. The 4x4 tableau you build takes up a lot of room. All right, last one for this episode. We'll be back next week talking about what we played in between, which will have a nice Walkerville game night in there. So hopefully I'll be able to share some more. We will bring Earth. Finally, in prep for this episode earlier today. So here's talk about hotness. Gwen and I tried Oros with 2 players. Because one of the things in Oros, and we've talked about this one a few times on the show during our plays of it, this is the populous game where you're taking land masses and mashing them together to build mountains, to send your followers to build you temples, to increase your knowledge and wisdom. That's the super short version. Well, one of the things in that game is it requires a minimum of 3 players. So you can play solo, but you have to play with 2 Atoma. Or you can play 2-player, but you have to play with a 3rd Atoma. Interestingly, and we did not try this, you can play with 4 demigods, 4 characters all the time. So you could play solo against 3 Atoma, or we could have played our 2-player game with 2 Atoma and had a full 4-player game, which I thought was pretty neat. What I was surprised by, and you'll get to hear this during the review, is I find Oros a really good game, but it's very fiddly. And I thought the AI was going to put it over the top. It was going to be like, this is just too much to manage, too fiddly, just too many little things to track and move around. And that's not at all what it was. Actually, the Atoma is one of the smoothest, simplest I've ever played once we figured out the iconography.
Mm-hmm. At the beginning, we were a little bit confused, especially by the fact that they don't start with a character on the board. And we were like, oh, it's their turn. Well, what do we do now? They don't have a character. How are they going to do anything? And then we realized they never have a character on the board. They just sort of pick a section of the board and do things. So we did originally miss a entire section of the rule book, which led to Googling videos and sitting there really confused, like we broke it already. Oh no. But we figured it out. And once we realized the iconography, it was really simple to play the Atomas. I was just like, whatever go around it, flip up the card. Okay. And just continue. I'm like, it was a couple seconds, just do whatever the Atoma did. And it was really easy to implement.
Yeah, one thing to be aware, if you ever play with them, is the Atoma does not play like players. They just make changes to the board and possibly get points. So don't expect them to be mashing land. Just suddenly a mountain will show up, or suddenly something will disappear, or suddenly they'll build a temple, even though they didn't have any players on the board. Like I was expecting them to play like another human, and they definitely do not.
No, it's sort of more... it's sort of more just messing around with the other players who are playing and like changing up what they would do. For example, we were going to build a mountain, and we did. And then the Atoma can move mountains automatically, and they moved it very far away from us. And it took us a while to eventually work our way back over to said mountain that we had built.
And we'll talk more about that in just a moment.
All right, well, that's what's hit our tabletops, both digital and physical lately. What about you? What have you been playing? We'd love to hear about it, especially if you post it in the What You've Been Playing section of our Discord at discord.tabletopbellhop.com. The classic 1982 board game Survive is back in a new, evolved form with streamlined gameplay and kaiju.
Survive the Island comes from Zygomatic and is being published here by Asmodee Canada, who we have to thank for sending us a sample. This is the latest iteration of the Survive series of games, with the most recent before this being Survive Escape from Atlantis from Stronghold Games.
Well, the basic gameplay of moving your meeples, trying to get them to safety, sinking part of the island, then activating monsters remains the same. This new edition changes things up in a few ways, all of which we thought were positive improvements. Survive the Island plays 2 to 5 players out of the box, is still great for families, and takes about an hour, often less.
Now, physically, Survive the Island comes in a smaller box than the most recent edition, and also has a really nice box insert. The island tiles are nice, thick cardboard. The adventurers, monsters, and rafts are wooden. The player boards are thick card and include useful reference information on them, and the instructions are very clear with lots of examples.
Now you can see all of that in our Survive the Island unboxing video, which actually went up live on YouTube the day we're recording this. My only complaint, component-wise, was the numbers on the bottom of the adventurers. They're just not as easy to read as I would like. Basically, they just carved the numbers in, but didn't ink them or anything. It's just bare wood, and it's kind of hard to see on some of the colors. So I'm strongly thinking about just inking mine. Now, what's nice is most of the wooden components, all the monsters are even silk screened and two-sided. And the different terrain types are different thicknesses, which actually gives the game a really nice 3D appearance on the table and great table presence.
The game is very eye-catching and has great component visuals. I was actually once able to convince people to try the game based almost entirely on just showing them the cool monster pieces.
Cool.
Now, you start a game of Survive the Island by building the island. This is done by all players at once, randomly placing tiles out onto the indicated area of the board. Next, players in turn order place one of their adventurers at a time onto the island, 1 per spot, except when playing with 5. With 5 players, once the board is full, you can double up on spots. Note, this is changed from earlier editions. Next, players each place 2 rafts in any water spot next to the island, and a sea serpent is placed on each of the indicated spots on the board.
The goal of Survive the Island is to get as many of your meeples off of the main island and onto any of the 4 shore spots on the edge of the board. The game ends when 3 volcano tiles are revealed, or there are no adventurers left to save. At that point, players add up the value of their saved meeple, and the player with the most points wins.
So there's 3 phases on each player's turn: action, rising waters, and creatures. During the action phase, players can play any previously gained ability tiles and then make 3 moves. Meeples can be moved on foot from land to another land tile or from land to a raft. Meeple can also move by swimming. That's from land or raft into water, or from water onto another water tile. You can only ever move a single meeple once by swimming per turn. Finally, you can move a raft, either an empty one that no one's in, or you can move a raft where you have the majority of the meeple in it. So by yourself, or if you have 2 out of 3. Rafts, of course, can only move on water.
Note, these movement rules are simplified from earlier versions. No longer do you have to spend an action to move from a water tile onto a raft in the same space, and when you leave a raft, you just move onto an adjacent land tile with land movement or water tile with swimming. If you move onto a space with a raft, you immediately move onto it if there is room.
In the Rising Waters phase, you remove 1 tile from the island. The tiles must be taken in order: beaches before forests and forests before mountains. Unlike previous editions, the tile taken does not have to be adjacent to the water, and any meeples that were on that tile are now left into the newly created water space.
Next, you take the tile you just grew and look at it look on the back of it without showing the other players. If it's red, something happens. You're just going to check the back of the book, find out what happens. Usually you're going to add something new to the board. You're going to put a new monster out or a raft. Sometimes, though, it might be like a whirlpool that destroys everything adjacent to it, including rafts, adventurers, and land. Now, if it's green, though, it's something you can use on a later turn during the action phase. It's some type of special ability. These include all kinds of things like moving rafts extra spaces due to having paddles, riding dolphins with your swimmers, moving monsters, and more.
The last phase, each turn, the active player rolls the monster die and activates all monsters of that type on the board. If the die type rolled isn't on the board, nothing happens. The base game comes with 3 monster types.
So there's sea serpents, which move 1 water tile, destroy all rafts and adventurers they encounter. The shark, which moves 1 or 2 water spaces, but can only eat adventurers in the water, not those on rafts. And the brand new to this edition kaiju, with move 1 or 2 spaces on land or water, and only destroy rafts. Everything else is scared of the kaiju and moves 1 hex away, being determined by the player moving the kaiju. Everyone's scared of kaiju, including the other kaiju.
If it comes to your turn and the game hasn't ended, but you have no meeple left to move, instead of taking an action phase, you complete the Rising Tide step twice, ignoring any green tiles, but activating any red tiles drawn as normal.
That's it. Move and spend tiles, sync part of the island, and maybe have something interesting happen, like new monsters. Then you roll a monster die and move monsters. Play until there's no one left to move, or 3 volcanoes show up. They only show up on mountain tiles, and there are 4 in the game, so you never know exactly when the game will end.
Survive is really a classic game that's been around in print for a long time. It's continued to be popular through the years, and we think this new edition is a great version of the game. It's great looking and maintains the key bits of the original game while making it easier to teach and play with simplified movement rules and subtle changes.
Now, I know a lot of people are curious exactly the difference between the two, so I am actually going to list off all the differences between this new edition and all the previous ones. So one of the big ones is this game plays 5 out of the box. You don't need an expansion. With playing 5 players, you use all the meeples and everyone still gets 2 rafts. Some spots will end up doubled up, as we mentioned before. You can now play any number of action tiles as you want, and they can be played between your 3 movement actions. So you can move, play a tile, then move again. Raft movement has been updated, as I described earlier, where moving onto and off ramps being from adjacent hexes, and meeples moving onto rafts immediately if there's room. Dolphins can now drop you off on land, so it's one way to escape the island. If you're out of meeples, you flood 2 tiles each turn instead of 1, and the tiles you flood do not have to be next to water. This is the one I've noticed most players who are playing my new version, who are used to the old one, are stuck thinking you can only flood things next to water. I realize thematically that makes more sense, but for gameplay wise, it's just a lot easier. You can flood anything you want. Now, the 3 volcano ending is also new. Now, when placing new rafts and monsters, one of the new rules is if there are none left in the supply, everything's out on the board, you get to move one of the ones that's on the board. When you roll the creature die, you must activate the monsters on the board. You can't choose not to. And of course, the kaiju replace the whales from the previous versions.
So in addition to this base game, we haven't played, but there are available 2 expansions for this version of the game, which are the Survive the Island Monster Pack, which give you some additional monster items, and the Best Friends Pack, which gives you a couple of meeple who you want to try and save both of them for a giant score bonus.
All right, having played the original game quite a few times, both the Stronghold version and the one before that, this is my favorite version so far of Survive. The movement rules are what really improved this version for me, especially in regards to rafts. I also really dig the kaiju because it lets you set up these fun chains where you force adventurers to move on to spots with sharks and sea monsters. And I really dig the volcano timer because, like, once 2 are up, you're like, oh, it could end any time. You don't really know. To me, this is now the definitive edition of Survive.
As a game that's been out for a very long time with any number of different versions and variations and things, it's nice to see this new, modern, really crisp, clean, professional, awesome looking game come out that just simplifies it a little bit and makes it, I think, probably more accessible to more players with a few minor tweaks in rules.
So we first played this one actually over at Gwen's grandmother's place, where we played with 5 players and everyone loved it. Now, my other daughter, Eve, in particular, really liked the take-that nature of the game. She likes games where she gets to screw over her sister and her parents, and really loved the monster phase and got very upset if she rolled the die and didn't get to do something nasty to someone.
Yeah, Eve tends to always love take that games, and I like them. Probably not as much as Eve, though, although the monster phase was probably also one of my favorites. Being able to do things like use kaijus to push people into sharks specifically was very fun, and dropping people into water next to things that were going to eat them.
So in addition to playing with the family, I brought Survive the Island out to a number of events here in Windsor, and it's been very popular, which doesn't surprise me. Like, the original game's been around for a lot of time. A lot of people grew up playing this game. Now, what I did find is that longtime fans of the game do have a bit of difficulty getting used to the rule changes, as they are somewhat subtle. That said, whenever I do catch fans of the game playing it, I always ask them at the end, what'd you think of these changes? And so far, everyone has found it to be an improvement. But people do miss the whales. And some people miss some of the other expansion content. Now, the one thing that is important to note is Sean mentioned this version does have expansions. Well, the older expansions are not technically compatible with this edition of the game, though I'm pretty sure people could probably house rule it to get it to work with any of the older stuff.
Yeah, and if you are picking up those new expansions, you get in with monsters, you bring back the whale if you've been missing that. And then you also get krakens, petrodactyls, and monster eggs, and piranhas. And as I mentioned, the BFX expansion just gives you an extra giant point total if you manage to rescue both friends.
So I did notice that you mentioned bringing them out to gaming events. I did bring Survive the Island out to a board game club event at school, and we began playing it with, I believe, 4 players. It was not usual players for Board Game Club because it was actually on a community night at school. So we had a couple people we had never met before. So it was me, a friend, 2 random people. We started playing it, and then people had to leave. So we did not end up finishing the game of Survive the Island, but the very beginning bit that we did play seemed to go over really well.
I got to say, like, I don't have too much more to say about this. It's a classic game. I think what most people listening to this or tuning in for this review probably wanted to know is what the differences are. And I got to say, if you don't own Survive, but have played it before and enjoy it, or think this is your kind of game, right? Just take that family weight. Like, this is not a complicated game. You can play with your kids. Just go pick up Survive the Island. Like, this is a great version of the game. Now, where I'm not positive, and you're going to have to make this decision on yourself, is if you already own a previous edition of Survive. Personally, I like this version. I like the look of this new version. I like that it's in a smaller box. I like the new look. I partly want to say just grab it because the new rules are better. But for the most part, you can just use those new rules with your copy of the game. The only thing that's not going to work is you'd have a whale instead of a kaiju, but you could just pretend it's a kaiju. You're also not going to have the 4 volcano tiles, so that's going to be a little different. One advantage, though, I will say of the new version is that it is being actively supported. It already has 2 expansions. I can't answer this for sure, but there could be more coming. So if you want a game that's going to be constantly supported with new content coming out, that might be another reason to pick up this new printing.
Because the 1982 version is not being supported anymore.
No, unfortunately, it's not, I guess. Now, if you have played any of the previous versions of Survive, I know sometimes we'll do these reviews and be like, if you don't like trick taking, you have to try this. I don't think this case, this new version is going to win you over. If you played any of the versions of Survive, this is still Survive, right? The basic mechanics are the same. You have a sinking island. You have a bunch of meeples on them that are worth various points. You have to decide who to save, and there's memory elements of having to remember where your 5s are. If you didn't enjoy that before, this isn't going to fix it. Now, I also think that if you don't like backstabby, stab your neighbor, be mean to each other games, you're going to avoid this one. This is not a game for you. This is a game for people like Eve and Gwen who like using the monsters to send people running into sharks' mouths. There is an entire phase each turn where your only action is to try to screw over the other players. Now, maybe if you're like, oh, I almost want to like Survive, but I hate the raft rules, maybe give this a shot. But honestly, that's pushing it. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up, Gwen?
I don't believe so.
All right.
Well, that's it for our look at Survive the Island, keeping games about saving meeples from sinking island popular and in print since the early 80s. What's a classic retro game that you enjoy? Is it still around like Survive, or has it gone out of print and faded from most people's memory? Either way, we want to hear about it. Post a comment wherever you found this review, or better yet, come over to the Tabletop Bellhop Discord and let us know at discord.tabletopbellhop.com. Do you remember Populous, the PC game? Well, Mo and I sure do. It was one of our favorite games. Well, now you can get that feeling out of landscape manipulation, influencing followers, and rising power on the tabletop through Oros.
So Oros was originally crowdfunded, then self-published by AESC Games. That's the version of the game we have, and that you can see behind me over here, a big chunky box. Now, Lucky Duck Games ended up picking up the game and is now localizing it and distributing it around the world. Now, the only difference that we're aware of in the two versions is aesthetic. It is component-wise. Gameplay-wise, the games are identical, and everything we say here applies to the Lucky Duck version of the game.
That said, the AESC version is really nice with triple-layered, two-sided player boards, plastic box inserts that are great for setting the game up, for use during gameplay, and for keeping everything safe and sorted. Lots of silk-screened wooden pieces, including followers, demigod markers, temple tiles, and more. This gives Oros a fantastic table presence.
Oros was designed by Brant Binkerhoff, who also did all the artwork for the game. It plays 1 to 4 players, with games taking an hour or 2 depending on player experience and what map setup you use. There is a learning curve in this game, and while the rulebook is pretty clear, things aren't always easy to find, and there are some ambiguities. We recommend having the Board Game Geek rule forums open when you are first playing so you can quickly find answers to any questions that come up.
So in Oros, you are playing demigods with earth-moving powers who guide their followers to gain wisdom and knowledge. Wisdom increases your ability to manipulate the land and influence your followers, whereas knowledge is what you need to win the game. Points, basically. Now, the main way to gain both is through building temples where your followers can study. But these only work if built close to the gods, and thus can only be built on top of mountaintops.
The designer calls this game a tile-colliding, volcano-erupting, mountain-making, wisdom-gathering, action economy strategy game. And that's actually a pretty good description. The core of the game is the ability to modify the land tiles on the board and constantly manipulate the play environment.
You start the game by building the initial land mass out of tiles placed on the board. The board is two-sided, and you can have a larger map or smaller map, and there are a number of set patterns recommended in the rulebook for you to explore. The rules have a recommended starting map, and we suggest you use that for your first game, at least, if not maybe a few more.
Yeah.
Now, most maps also have some initial volcanoes to place.
So the island tiles in this game are numbered 1. They're just one landmass with an island, and then there are other land tiles numbered 1 to 4, which indicates how many sides of that tile are land and how many are sea, and there's mountains. On each player's first turn, they're going to pick an island to start on. Now, the volcanoes are also numbered 1 to 4, which indicates how much land they will create when erupted.
Players each get a player board that lists 6 actions, each of which has a tracker to show how powerful they are. They start with 5 followers, 1 on the map, 2 on their board, and 2 ready to be used. 3 additional followers can be unlocked later. Each turn, players will take 3 actions. They do this by picking up a worker from an action spot and moving it to an open one. While that sounds simple enough, it's actually a very neat system that's harder to figure out than you would expect, especially after you've unlocked additional followers.
Now, without getting into too much detail, 3 of the actions let you manipulate the land tiles. You can shift entire rows and columns, moving every tile in them, but you can't move any that contain a mountain unless you've reached a fairly high level in shifting. You can move sets of tiles. Here you can mash tiles into other tiles. Tiles add their values together and are replaced by new tiles. If the tile total is higher than 4, you add volcanoes equal to the difference on top. Mountains are made by mashing up 2 or 4 tiles together. There is an upgrade that lets you make these 3s or 4s. Now finally, you can erupt volcanoes on the map. They add landmass onto the tiles they are on until it's a 4 and then spread to adjacent tiles.
The Build a Sacred Site action lets you place one of your site tiles on the board where you have a follower and start or add to a temple. These can only be done on mountains, and each mountain can only hold 1. Temples have 3 levels, but you can only contribute 1 sacred site to each temple, either level 3, 2, or 1. When building a sacred site, the player who built it gains wisdom, experience, and knowledge points based on what level they built. Then anyone else who has a follower on a different level of the temple that was already built gets a bonus in wisdom.
The Send or Retrieve Followers action lets you take followers from your action spots and send them either to the main board onto a temple spot or onto one of the 2 study spots on your player board. Or you can retrieve followers from those same spots, and those returned followers must be placed on an open action. Every follower that you retrieve from study gets you 1 wisdom.
Each point of wisdom you gain lets you level up one of the abilities on your player row or advance one of the temple scoring tracks for endgame points. Every single action in the game can be improved. Shift lets you move things more spaces and eventually move mountains. Erupt lets you set off more volcanoes. At the top of each track, you unlock points and the ability to gain knowledge when you take each action. And finally, if you level up all 5 of your abilities past a certain point, you unlock more workers and endgame scoring for workers.
So the final action is to journey workers. This lets you move your people around on the map. They have to move over land until you unlock the swimming ability with wisdom. You also can't move onto other players' spots until you unlock the ability to do that.
So knowledge are the points in Oros. Every time you gain knowledge, you move your demigod figure up a ziggurat track, leapfrogging anyone whose space you move onto. This track is the timer for the game, which ends when any player's demigod reaches the top. You finish out the round, and then everyone scores.
So a player's final score consists of their position on the ziggurat track, plus any points for getting to the higher levels of the wisdom tracks, points for followers currently studying based on how many workers you unlocked, and points for each of your sacred sites. Player with the most points wins.
When playing with less than 3 players, you must play Oros against an automa. 2 if you're playing solo. All 4 of the different player boards can be converted to an automa, and each presents a different difficulty level. Human players play the same, and the automa actions are dictated by a deck of cards.
Now, that's a super high level overlook. And there's obviously a lot more to it than that. But I think it gives you a good overview without getting into the details of exactly how to mash land tiles and the way it wraps around the board representing a globe.
So to give you a kind of idea how this all fits together for someone who hasn't sat and played the game is basically you're going to be manipulating the land, trying to build mountains so that you can start to build temples with your sacred site tiles. Now, to build the temples, you'll have to move your workers around the board to get to the right spots. And building temples is almost like semi-cooperative because you only have 3 of each level and you can only contribute 1 level to each temple. So by you starting a temple, you're leaving it for the other players to finish off. And part of the game is racing to get to like that top spot. Timing on when to build is important because of this, as is manipulating the action economy. You're going to want to improve your abilities with wisdom, but you also have to decide if you will specialize, gaining some knowledge along the way, or diversify, which will unlock more followers. Plus, you also have to use that wisdom to make those temples worth points at the end of the game. So there's a lot of decision points here, which gives Oros a very strong puzzle feel.
One of the things that I think really needs to sort of be understood about this game is the fact that it's not cooperative, but it's also not fully competitive. There is that, Mo was saying that sort of semi-cooperation where you have to cooperate even though you're trying to beat each other, because it's a little bit hard to get your head around sometimes that you have to work together to compete against each other. And I think it's one of the places where I fell down most in my first playing of the game and why I kind of got crushed, because it's not something I was used to. I was trying to do my thing, and well, you can't just do your own thing. It's literally impossible.
Yeah. Now, what drew me to this game originally when I first saw it is the fact it reminded me of Populous, right? Like you're literally playing demigods, looking down at the world top down, and you're mashing land masses together, erupting volcanoes, and moving your followers around to build temples. Like that basically was kind of Populous. Now, you don't get all the fun abilities like shooting lightning bolts at people, but you do gain in power as the game goes on, which makes it easier to move things around and unlocks more ways to get points and more followers. And as we talked about in some other recent game reviews thing recently that I like, and one of the things I like in this is, again, the scoring is very player driven. you get to determine what's going to score points for you. It could be leveling up your wisdom, or it could be I'm going to try to play all of my lower level temple tiles and make those worth a ton of points. And then there's just a fun escalation, because as the game ramps up and people have more abilities, more land masses are moving, and there's more smashing and there's more temples. I just think the concept of this game is just cool and fun.
Now, one of the things that really stand out about this game is that land manipulation and working with the tiles. And it takes a bit to get your head around it.
Yeah, because like honestly, the manipulating the land is a fun and fascinating part. It's neat to see how the board changes and grows as you're playing. Now, another aspect of the game I really like is that action system, because it sounds so simple. You're like, oh, you just choose to use an action. There's just something smart about it that you just don't see until you go to do it, because you're like, oh, yeah, that's easy. I'll just take the action I want. But then you'll like do your 3 actions, and it goes around the board and it comes back to you and you're like, okay, and now I just need to, oh, shoot, I have a guy there. Oh, wait, the only spots I have open are I'm going to have to shift some land just to free up the spot to be able to do the thing I want to do, which means to do the thing. And then I need to do this. And like the designer obviously recognized this as being a part of the game, because the game actually comes with 6 tokens specifically that only exist to plan out your turn. And I got to say, I really dig the action manipulation and action economy in this game. I think it's a part of the fun of the game.
I end up tending to use the action counters to plan out my turn, and then I'll flip them up and I'll be like, I was going to do this, but why was I going to do this? So although they help, sometimes I still forget what I was doing, because sometimes turns can be a little bit long between, because there will be that complication of trying to figure out, oh, wait, I had something planned, but I don't have something planned, but I can't do this now. So there's a little bit of AP, but not too much. Yeah.
So one of the interesting things I think you'll notice just listening to this review, if you've never seen this game before, we have only touched on this on a high level. There is a lot of stuff.
Yes. And that's honestly the biggest problem with this game. This is like almost the epitome of like, you hear people use the term fiddly. And now when I hear fiddly, I think Oros. Like there's just a lot of little things to remember. There's a lot of different upgrades to your abilities. I think every ability has 4 or 5 different levels for what it can do. The map has some really unique rules that aren't intuitive, especially because they're trying to recreate a globe where you can spin things as well as shifting, which I didn't even want to get into when we were talking about taking the different movement actions. Sometimes things happen on other players' turns that affect you. And then there's just like oddball things that don't come up every game that aren't easy to remember. Like, what do you do when you unlock a new follower, but then don't have any action spots? What do you do with the extra meeple? Sometimes you can unlock a follower on another player's turn. A couple weeks back, we talked about board games that would be better off as video games. The title of that episode is Going Digital. I think it was 269. And I mentioned Oros as one of the games that inspired us to even talk about that topic, because even after multiple plays of Oros, I find there's still something. Every game I need to look up or double check or Google or flip through the rule book to find.
Yeah, this is one of those games where, as we've talked about so many times, you're going to start off playing it extreme. Don't get upset. Just accept it. Make a mental note of what you've done wrong and keep going, because you're going to make more mistakes too. So starting over right then is just kind of pointless. Make a bunch of mistakes that first time through, learn some of the quirks of the game, and then have a better second experience, maybe.
Now, despite the fiddliness and having to look things up, I will say I have enjoyed all of my plays of Oros. Like the game's neat. I do dig games that feel like puzzles to be solved, and there's a lot of that there. At 3-player, I found the game enjoyable enough, but it is a little odd, like Sean was talking about, with that cooperation at times, especially with the contributing to temple rules. Like with 3 players, to complete a full temple requires a contribution of all 3 players. And there's this weird thing going on where you want to help yourself. And there's a timing thing where you're like, well, if I build this, you're just going to come over and build the next level. So I'm going to hold off. And there's this like playing chicken thing that's going on, but then you realize you have to do it or nothing's going to happen. It's just kind of odd. And it just, to me, doesn't feel like that's in the spirit of the game. Like it just feels off to me. Now, all of that went away once we played 4 players. At 3 players, I gotta admit, I'm kind of on the fence. I'm like, I don't know. This game's kind of fiddly. I don't know if the fiddliness is worth it. Like I'll play it. If someone said, "Hey, do you want to play Oros, or can you teach me Oros?" Happily, I'll do it. And I will introduce the game to new players who I think would dig it. Like if they start talking to me about Populous, I'll be like, "Hey, I got a board game you'll probably like." But at 4, it is a totally different situation for me. And I was kind of blown away when we played with 4 players because the game just had a very different vibe. And honestly, like part of it's just the fact there's more happening. There's more things that change between your turn, and the board's getting manipulated more, and more volcanoes are being erupted. You're generally, if you're playing on the bigger board, there's just more interesting things happening. But really, the biggest change is the fact that 3 people can contribute to each temple. It has to be 3 different players. Well, with 4 players, that means every temple that's built, someone's left out and someone's getting missed out on. And that really increased the player interaction and removed some of that tit for tat play that felt odd to me. Now you're probably going to rush to get yours built because otherwise you're not going to get to play all 3 of your bottoms, or you're not going to get to play your 3, or you're going to run out. And at this point, honestly, the only way I will happily sit down and say, "Hey, let's get together and play a game of Oros," is with 4 players.
I will say with 4 players, I felt that there was a bit of more ability to get your different types of sacred sites out. Because in 3 players, it's sort of like, oh, this person built all the bottoms, the next person built all the tops, and then the next person built like the middle part. Whereas in 4 players, you sort of like got out all different types of pieces because there was that rush to try and get for any type of piece in a temple due to the fact that you could be excluded. Whereas in 3 players, it was like, well, I know that, I don't know, Gwen's going to play their last bottom because they're scoring for those. So I can just kind of wait. And then I'll get the second one. That'll be worth more.
It's interesting that the Board Game Geek community seems to think 3 is the best way to play this game.
Well, I guess I don't agree with the BGG community on this one. I don't know. I definitely felt better with 4. Now, as for using the Atoma, they work pretty well. I really like the fact there are 4 different levels of Atoma, and they're more asymmetric than you think. Like at first glance, you just think each has a different deck, maybe does something different, but like their scoring opportunities are actually unique. Like the different sides of the boards are different. Now, I will admit it took a bit to learn the symbology used because it's similar, but not the same as the actions on the player board. And I think the big thing to realize is that the Atoma are not another player. It's not like a ghost player. They're doing their own wonky thing that the players can't do. And I expected, because this game is as fiddly as it is, that the AI would be clunky and it would be like more than I'd want to deal with, but it's actually quite elegant. And honestly, if I do sit down to play Oros with 3, if the 3 of us got together tonight to play Oros, I think I'd throw in that 4th Atoma player to hopefully get that increased interaction.
Mm-hmm. I felt the Atoma was actually quite easy to use. I'm like, it was just flip up a card, do the thing. And it was easy. It was good. It worked really well. Again, the symbols were a bit of a problem at the beginning. We did have to look those up in the book. Do not skip the page that they are on like we did, because that will result in a little bit of confusion. Specifically, most of them match up with your player abilities, but like when they're going to place a guy in a temple, it's just a photo of a guy, and you're like, that doesn't match up with any of my symbols. What are they doing? Oh.
Yeah, so one of the things to watch is the rule book in here, again, is not great for reference. So there's a section at the start of the rule book that talks about setting up for 2 players, and it says you have to use an Atoma, but then the actual rules for the Atoma are in the back of the book. So make sure you check both sections when using an Atoma for the first time. Overall, I think Oros is a really interesting game. Like there's some really neat stuff going on. I don't get to say this often. It really does not feel like any other game in my collection. So that doesn't have any comparison to anything else, which I can't say that often. And that's a good thing, in my opinion. Games doing different things is awesome. This has some stuff I really enjoy. I really like the action economy in this game and the way you take actions. And man, I've screwed myself over so many times, and it always feels like, oh, I shouldn't have messed that up. But it's a good feeling. Like it's not frustrating. It's just like, oh, I should have known better. I should have planned that better. But there's a lot of fiddly rules. The rule book's not the best to reference, and there's a lot of edge cases. So this is what holds me back from introducing this game to new players. because it's a bit of, there's a learning curve here and a pretty steep one, and players can easily get frustrated instead of have fun. Like there's some work to get to the fun. With the right group though, it can be a lot of fun. And I got to say, I definitely think it's more enjoyable with a table of 4. Like I almost wonder if a simplified rule set might have been better. The big thing I would want to remove from this game, and I almost want a house rule if I'm teaching someone new, is the rotational movement. The way tiles are next to each other that aren't physically next to each other, and the fact the board wraps around. Like just remove that you can't twist. You can just shift columns and rows and pretend it's a flat universe. And I just think that would make the game, at least for first kind of play, much less confusing, because a lot of those edge pieces and edge circumstances come up because of the weird rotation and how things are adjacent rules to make that map a globe.
I will say, when we're playing, normally players tend to forget you can even do that, so it may not even come up at all, because people won't rotate it, because they won't remember that you can rotate it. But then when it does happen, it ends up being exceptionally unexpected, because you forget that the pieces can move like that. But also, because of how it works, if a mountain is placed in any of those spots, then the whole thing just doesn't turn. You cannot move those rows anymore, just because they rotate and there's a mountain on one side of that board in that circle area.
Yeah. So again, if you unlock enough abilities, you can then shift the mountains. But again, that's very exception-based play, right? You can't do this unless, you can't do this except, right? There's a lot of that going on in Oros.
Now, what this means in the end is that this is very much a try before you buy kind of game. Well, I'm sure some of you listen to this and were like, oh, this is the game for me. Absolutely. I think most people are going to want to give it a shot, see if they like it before spending any money on it, which is kind of sad because this is a really unique and interesting game.
Now, the one group I do think will enjoy this game, kind of to loop back where we started, are people like Sean and I who grew up playing Populous on the Amiga or Commodore. I guess it was on the SNES. I don't remember it being a Nintendo game. I still love that game to this day, and I got to say, this does feel quite a bit like Populous. It's not exactly the same game, but there is definitely a Venn diagram there that's overlapping, and I think Populous fans are going to at least enjoy one play of this just to get to play around with it and mash those land masses together.
I will say, before we end off this review, I did want to quickly mention that it is colorblind friendly. The different pieces do have little symbols on them within the art. It's integrated really well, so honestly, you don't even notice it most of the time, and are just like, oh, colors. But if you can't see the colors, well, it's very color friendly because of the little symbols.
Good call.
And with that, it's time to let our followers return to their study and hopefully gain some board game wisdom as we wrap up this review of Oros, or as we like to call it, Populous, the board game. If you've tried this game, we'd love to hear about what you think about it on our Discord, in the comments, or on social media.
Now, if you enjoyed this review and the other content we create, you can show your appreciation with some Tabletop Bellhop merch. You can find a selection of mugs, hoodies, and board game themed t-shirts drawn by Gwen herself over at tabletopbellhop.com/merch, now with lower prices.
That was the double bell.
That means our shift's coming to an end and we're going to have to lock the lobby doors.
Before we start locking things down, let's take a moment to thank a selection of our Tabletop Bellhop patrons.
David Hutchinson, thank you.
Roger Mlush, thanks, Roger.
Diane Tuzano, thanks, Bubby.
Thank you, Kator.
Jeff and Sheila Seuss, thank you very much.
Ron F., thank you, Ron.
Now, your first stop to finding us should be at tabletopbellhop.com, but you can find us all over the web as Tabletop Bellhop, one word, and on your podcatcher of choice as the Tabletop Bellhop Gaming Podcast.
We love answering your game and game night questions online, through email, and of course here on the podcast. Send your questions to questions@tabletopbellhop.com or click on Ask the Bellhop on our webpage, or you know what, hit me up on social media. We'll talk there too.
I also invite everyone to tip your bellhop by heading to patreon.com/tabletopbellhop.
That's all for us tonight.
For the Tabletop Bellhop Gaming Podcast, I'm Sean.
I'm Gwen.
And I'm Mo.
Thank you.
And game on.